Hi, Monica. Yesterday.
Thank you.
Are you telling me that you have a way to defer the tax situation there? Is that what you're telling me?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And so the first one I was referring to is a 1031 exchange, which only applies to investment real estate. The second one I'm referring to is called a deferred sales trust.
A real hesitant to believe in a lot of these kinds of things. So it's a major feat for me to say, wow, this actually really worked. And it was really cool.
1031 is a way to shelter your income when you sell the thing. The DST is a way to avoid the 1031 and not have to suffer the time penalty.
Our career and during different tax periods, we've seen, these tax avoidance, tax minimization, offshore, all these different strategies undertaken to minimize or avoid taxes. And then I can tell you that, some of them are just not worth the trouble. And so I was skeptical. Admittedly, I was skeptical. I thought, oh yeah, here we go, another one of these, right? And then they say, no, it really is different, right? So look more closely. We looked more closely. We had, honestly, 2 years of conversations. 2 years. Now we were being due diligence at the same time that we were doing due diligence, but 2 years is a long time to be, sort of flirting with the idea of and getting to know the people and getting to really understand the transaction. Yeah, long story short, we got comfortable, although we are not tax attorneys, lawyers, or estate planning attorneys, that at least, from an investment perspective, that, it made sense to sell a highly appreciated asset, get liquid, hold that in this type of a deferred or installment sale type of instrument, and then just be in a position then to do the most important thing. I'm probably stealing your next question, which is time. They say, well, you can't make more time. You can. The deferred sales trust, in a way, allows you to lengthen the investment time horizon for those assets after getting liquid, but before having to feel the tax impact. And from an investment manager's perspective, time horizon is the most important element in investing.
Awesome. Well, welcome everybody into another Capital Gains Tax Solutions Mastermind, Deferred Sales Trust, Focus Edition. We're joined by Jake Meller. How you doing, buddy?
Doing very well. Pierce York, how are you today?
Doing awesome. And Micah is in the house. What's up?
Hello. Good to be here.
Yeah, we got some
Talk
new
more
faces.
about deferred sales trust.
Definitely. We got some new faces too. Looks like I saw Monica Chang popping in there before the show started, and we got Baltazar.
Hi there. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Thank you.
Awesome. I don't know if our fearless leader will be able to make it today, but we're hoping he can make a cameo for us over here.
With or without him, the show must move on. So
the show must go on.
Tell us a little bit about what is the deferred sales trust and why it'll show up today.
Sure. So the vision for the group is to bring together a community and to educate and go over just this strategy that we, at least the top three of us, love to death. And we're hoping that you will too, once you see what it does, what it can do for you, the freedoms it can provide. And so that's what we're here for. We're here to answer questions. We're here to get to kind of build that know, like, and trust factor. We're here to educate, and we're here to create that community of people. And so that's kind of the vision for what we're doing, why we're here. We are definitely a team-oriented mindset, for sure. Building a team is the goal of every single one, because it takes a team. It takes a village, man, to pull one of these off. It really does.
Not just to raise a child, but to pull off a deferred sales trust. How about that, Pierce?
To also to pull off a deferred is an incredible solution once you get to know it, but it does require a team. So that's what we're here for. That's why everyone joins us. We do this every Friday. We go over just kind of like what it is, the vision, deal stories, and then we kind of open it up for questions, comments, concerns, but mainly questions.
Absolutely. Now, Pierce, I think in today's format, we'll actually do an explanation of what is the deferred sales trust. A few questions in the queue from before that we'll pay attention to today. We'll actually answer. So we'll talk about what is the deferred trust. We'll address some of those questions. We'll bring to the table some of our current deals. Without revealing names, we'll talk about scenario, because it might be a scenario that's very similar to somebody else here in the audience, and it might benefit them in knowing how the deferred sales trust might be a benefit for them. And then we'll open up the latter 15, 20 minutes for questions and answers. A little bit of impromptu there at the end.
Ooh, impromptu.
Right. So deferred sales trust. What is a deferred sales trust? Essentially, by the name and title itself, we're deferring the recognition for tax purposes of the sale or the date of the sale to the future. So you can actually have the sale, funds can transfer, though we might alter and change, and we might put a deferred sales trust in the middle so that the funds actually transfer to the trust. And the seller receives the proceeds, the buyer receives the asset, and everything can occur without big ramifications in the current year. So what does all that mean? Put a case in point. Somebody sells a small little hotel in Colorado for $13 million. Prior to the day of the sale, they exercise the right to use the deferred sales trust to sell it, which means that they have to actually exchange the hotel with the trust and exchange it for a promissory note. So now instead of being the proud owners of a hotel, they're the proud owners of a promissory note. And because the trust, the deferred sales trust, now owns the hotel, it can then sell to the buyer. And because it's the trust selling to the buyer, not the person, it's the trust that receives the proceeds and not the person. This is not a taxable transaction for the person. And that's incredibly important. That's why we're all here today. So that for all of us who might be having perhaps one of the largest transactions of your life, you might be selling your home that you've lived in for 30, 40 years in the state of California, where it's appreciated greatly. And you might be moving to Utah. Welcome, right? By the way, I'm from Utah.
Yeah.
And if you're doing that and you're incurring capital gains above and beyond what the exemption is for persons, and in fact, if it's in the $1 million range above, then a deferred sales trust might be a good vehicle for you so that you don't have to pay taxes on money, but you can roll it over into other investment in the name of the trust. Okay.
Hold on. You will pay taxes eventually. You'll just defer them for the time being.
It's a good caveat. In 2023, you will not need to pay those taxes. And again, we're going to pay those taxes, although in many circumstances and scenarios, you are able to defer forward and forward and forward. As prudent advice, we do encourage that people do take funds or distributions out of the trust at some point to show the IRS that they do have intentions down the line of paying those taxes. Now, that IRS that we have intention of paying those taxes at some point, this can also be used as a generation and a legacy vehicle. And so there were father and son. Almost all of the assets were in the name of father. Because of being able to move these assets into the trust in exchange for promissory notes, everything else, and then sell those assets and invest in other things, we were able to, over time, shift assets in a non-taxable way from father to son. And that was something that we were able to achieve because we used not as a singular strategy, but as a keystone strategy, the deferred sales trust. Now, for all of you out there who are wondering what a keystone is, think of an archway over a door. And there's a stone in the middle. And it happens to be the keystone in this arch that keeps the entire arch intact, keeps the arch from falling without this keystone as well. And that's kind of the deferred sales trust in a nutshell. It is a keystone strategy. It's one of those strategies that you should combine other stones in the arch. You should be doing other tax planning and mitigation efforts. But with this in the middle, if you are eligible for deferred sales trust because you have a transaction that warrants one, then it becomes a strategy that all other strategies kind of flow around because it does the big lifting. And then everything else has a more appropriate place. Instead of using a round peg to fit in a slot, you are fitting other strategies in an appropriate way and not overusing them, as sometimes advisors tend to do because they just don't know what else is out there. I don't know if that explanation is helpful, Pierce.
I like to use, yeah, it's super helpful. Here's another way to put it. Sometimes, like when you're putting together some of these different strategies, it's almost like building it with Legos, logs, and mega blocks and duct tape. Right? Like sometimes I just like super seamlessly fit all together. And you got a big old mega block and you're trying to put a Lego on it and it doesn't quite fit. So you build a structure around it with enough duct tape, right? Some super glue maybe. But it's so much more seamless when you just build the whole, right? It's so much easier and more fluid and systematic, and it just fits so much better together. And so
when you have the right tool for the right job.
Yeah, when you have the right stuff, right? And so I think deferred sales trust is a few strategies out there that allow you to build around it, but it builds around everything else super elegantly. And it just makes everything flow seamlessly. So
there are some times when it doesn't make sales trust, right? So maybe you could talk a little bit about what those things are when it doesn't make sense.
Sure. So
Pierce, can I jump in?
Yes.
I just have something. You use the deferred sales trust when you have an asset that you want to sell. If you're not wanting to sell, but you're wanting to transfer the asset, the deferred sales trust is not that tool. So we consulted with an individual who's 74 years old and wanted to leave a mansion cabin house to his kids. It was the thing. It was the asset he wanted to leave. It wasn't the proceeds of the sale. There was no sale. And there are some tax benefits to just dying. And I say that somewhat comically, but like in this scenario, his kids would step up in basis to inherit this mansion cabin house. Whereas if you were to sell it, that might solve other problems. Perhaps if the kids wanted the money more than the asset, if the kids wanted to then sell it later, it might make sense for him to sell it now and use a deferred sales trust to do that so he can distribute evenly while he's alive and while he's able to make decisions, everything else. But that wasn't his goal. His goal is this mansion cabin house has been in the family for 3 generations. I want it to be in there for at least 5. So his goal was just to let it pass on. And so we highly encouraged him to, work with an estate planning attorney and to get a lot of things in order so that, if anytime in the process he should change his mind, he's got ability, everything else, but the deferred sales trust was not needed in that circumstance or scenario. Pierce, when else is the deferred sales trust not necessary?
I would say it's not a great tool for you if your goal is to just not reinvest the proceeds. If you want to go out and travel the world and buy Ferraris and boats, and you don't want to turn them into business and you don't want to reinvest, or you want your risk profile is so low that you're going to just only put them into a very low. Basically, you don't want to reinvest the money. You're just going to let it sit in a bank account in cash. It's probably not a tool for you. Okay. Part of it is to reinvest. So
if I reverse engineer what you're saying, instead of saying who it's not good for, if I say who it is good for, it's for somebody who has a transaction that has at least $1 million of potential capital gains or money that's going to be subject to capital gains tax, right? So if it's $1.5 million sale and you have a basis of 500,000, you've got $1 million that's subject to capital gains, right? So something like that or bigger. So that's an eligible transaction. Number two, your goal and objective is not just to spend it on personal stuff, but to reinvest it. You might say, well, I want to buy some duplexes and I want to open up a property management company and all these other things. And for me, that's personal. Well, when we talk tax language, things are separated between what could be considered business on your tax return and what is personal. And so in regards to the deferred sales trust, we like to reinvest. And if your goal is not to reinvest, but just to spend, then we possibly would suggest that the deferred sales trust is not the right fit.
One of my favorite stories, right, is, and I bring this up because there's usually a way around it, right? When you come and talk to us, right? And really have a clarity on your goals and what you want to do with the money, right? So there was a guy on actually this mastermind, probably, I don't know, a year and a half ago. And his goal was to sell his house and downsize, but he wanted to buy another personal residence. He had to, because he needed someplace. And I think base 1,000 and he owed 200,000. And his big, problem was that, look, I need the money to go buy a house because I can't qualify for a loan because I'm retired and I don't have, enough money to do it. And so that was his goal. It was going to be kind of a personal use thing is what he was trying to do. And so he kind of heard that and he's like, okay, this is a personal use item, so this isn't necessarily for me. Long story short, we ended up pulling out some more, and he started, telling us a little bit more about everything else. And we were able to kind of come to this idea. Okay, hey, listen, maybe what you can do is do a cash out refi up to your basis. So you can now take that money and give it. Then you can sell the house. You can pay off all the debt and defer the tax. And then from there, right, you can use the money that you got from the cash out to go put down on a down payment. And you can use the cash flow that you receive from the note as a way to qualify for the loan to go out and buy the house that you want to buy. And in the meantime, that's going to save you almost $900,000 in tax. So there are ways to kind of, work them out depending upon your goals. And I only bring that up just to say, probably more for a humble brag, right? Because the people around us are really smart. So, that's the benefit of using something like that with a team like this. And I really want to harp on that, right? It's the team effort, because they're some of the smartest people, in the world when it comes to this stuff. And so that's a huge part of it is. And that also kind of brings me to this, that, like, when you do a sales trust, you do give up a slight bit of control. There is an unrelated third-party trustee who owns it. So if it's somebody who does not want to give up any sort of control, right, that's an aspect to this that has to be discussed. And so I had a gentleman, and I bring this up because I had a gentleman who we were talking through, and this actually would have been a really good fit for him, but he's like, well, I don't want to give up the control. And that was a sticking point for him. And he wouldn't move past it. And so, because of that, it wasn't a good fit. So I think that's, something that you have to do. And that's part of why the mastermind exists, right? To build that know, like, and trust factor here, so you can understand who we are, why we do what we do, how it can benefit you, and give you the list of, hey, here's the pros, here's the cons, here's your options. Now let's go ahead and make the best and wisest decision.
No, Brett, Brett Pierce. Anyway, I think those are a series of very important points to bring up so that individuals understand who this is for and who this is not. And I'd like to invite Jake Carpenter, who's here with us out of the state of Washington. If Jake Carpenter, there might be other people here from the state of Washington. Do you want to say hello, introduce yourself, and then could you bring up maybe one of the deals that we've been working on recently and just talk about the scenario of the deal? Because that's where we're at in the show today. We'd like to talk about a few live deals.
Yeah, I'm Jake Carpenter. I own and run Carpenter Capital. Washington State, work all over the country with great guys like Jake Meller, Pierce, Brett Swartz. We have a really great team, and I'm going to piggyback a little bit on Pierce and then move into the deal discussion that Jake Meller just brought up. What I like about what Pierce said is, yes, there are a few things that can make the deferred sales trust maybe not appropriate, but the most important thing that I would encourage you to do if you're on this or know of someone that is on the fence is you've got to get a hold of guys like Jake, Pierce, Brett, myself. You got to get a hold of us and let us take a look at the entire picture, because sometimes it's just like what Pierce said. When we look at a micro, at your situation from a micro perspective, that particular situation, yeah, might not be a good fit for the deferred sales trust. But when we look at the macro perspective, there may be other factors that could qualify the deferred sales trust as being a foundational tool to build your estate plan or build your retirement plan on. So just be cautious of the, always or never type of, if it fits into this and if it doesn't fit into that. Yes, there are qualifying factors, but don't hesitate to reach out to these guys like Jake and Pierce and Brett to qualify based on your entire financial picture, because most of the people we work with, Jake and Pierce can attest to this, they've got a lot going on in a lot of different arenas in their financial world. It's not just stocks, bonds, mutual funds, real estate, and businesses. There's a lot going on. So with that, gosh, which deal should we talk about? Maybe the last one that we worked on. There's a lot of aspects to it. In this particular deal, we had to use a 1031 exchange in order to address debt over basis. Okay. This is one thing that even the CPAs don't quite understand, or they don't catch, is if you have the sale of a highly appreciated asset, likely there could be some debt. What you have to do is make sure you consult with your CPA to find out what your adjusted basis is and how much debt is on that particular asset. Because if you've got $300,000 of adjusted basis, but you've got $2 million of debt, you've got a problem in the amount of $1.7 million of debt over basis. Now, you cannot defer capital gains tax on that 1.7. And the way it shows up is it gets taxed as ordinary income in that transaction. Now, you may just give up and just pay the tax or not sell, but you can use something called a zero coupon Delaware statutory trust to absorb through the acquisition of a highly leveraged property and take, instead of 2.7 million, you might take $500,000 and replace 2.7 million with just a small investment of capital through that zero coupon. So the last deal that Jake and I worked on together, and Brett, that was the situation. It was multiple sales. There was quite a bit, I think it was $2 million plus of debt over basis. We put the transaction into a 1031 exchange at first. We replaced the debt over basis with the zero coupon. And then we dropped the remaining proceeds into the trust.
Into the deferred sales trust.
Into the deferred sales trust. And that point, we Jake and I worked together to figure out great options for them to invest the remaining almost $3.5 million into. So there's So,
I was just going to bring up, Jake, that
Go
in
ahead.
the very first of the call, we talked about how the deferred sales trust oftentimes can become a keystone strategy. And I explained the arch, the stone or the brick arch, and how in the middle of the arch that kind of holds everything together, that becomes kind of like a main strategy is often the deferred sales trust. And that's exactly what happened with this client. Their goal is that they wanted to defer the gross proceeds that they were going to receive and be able to reinvest them. We were able to do that with the deferred sales trust, but in our discussions with them, we uncovered other problems, right? We found out that they had a debt over basis issue. That was something that, to your point, not even their accountants were very aware of or understood how that was going to be a huge tax ramification that would come back to bite them. However, we, just like in a stone archway, there's other stones next to the keystone. We were able to add zero coupon Delaware Statutory Trust as one of those side stones or side bricks, right? And then we were able to put together proper investment strategies. And there's just a lot of other things that we were able to do with this client to help him achieve his reinvestment goals, to the point, Jake, that he has invested more with us than he originally thought because he didn't have to pay taxes. And because he didn't have to spend so much on this debt over basis tax issue, and because he didn't have to spend taxes this year because of the transaction, he's invested quite a bit more with us and has broadened his outlook on what he can invest in. Before, his narrow outlook was just real estate. And now he's investing in real estate that is a little bit more niche through a Reg D fund and other businesses through other Reg D funds. And that is something that maybe he wouldn't have considered before if we didn't liberate a lot of the money that he would have otherwise had to send to the government agencies in the form of tax.
He's been so excited with the work that we've done for him that he's referred us probably, I think we're close to 24 referrals. But you're right. And so we got two kinds of investors through the deferred sales trust, right? We got active investors or we got passive investors. And some of them they want to be a little bit active and a little bit passive. And so he just wanted to hit the pause button for about 5 years, 5 to 7 years, be passive, invest in some Reg D syndications and some other business interests and things. And then in a few years down the road, when those things turn around, decide if he wants to take the remaining proceeds that come back and maybe get into a little bit more active position. So there's so much flexibility to using the deferred sales trust, as Jake Miller said, as a keystone strategy to build the retirement plan around, to build the estate plan around, because sometimes maybe they're such a high net worth that we need to address federal and state estate taxes as well. But all of these things can be built around a foundational keystone strategy that we can use the deferred sales trust for.
Absolutely. Appreciate you sharing that live case deal that we helped from start to finish. When I say start to finish, not only establishing the trust, but once it's established, we're not done. In fact, we had that question just the other day, Brett and I and Pierce. There was an individual that asked, well, once the trust is set up, do you all leave me? Am I alone? And the answer is no. And so when I say start to finish, that means that we've effectively helped the proceeds inside of the trust get actively or appropriately based on the individual's risk tolerance, their time horizon, their goals and objectives, reinvested in such a way that it's working for them, that all functions of the trust are humming appropriately because the engine is moving, right? Brett, glad to have you join us here today. And
hello, everybody. How are we doing?
We're in time, I think, for one more deal story of the week. We've had a couple that we've been sharing, and I don't know if you want to bring up one that's active that we're working on right now.
Why don't we share a past one? This one's pretty cool. This is a deal out of Los Angeles. It was a primary home, and a client of mine, she'd worked for the state. She was like an inspector of like apartment buildings and different things for the state to make those good housing for folks across Los Angeles for 30 plus years. And so she owned this house. It was a primary home. And I think she bought it is like 35 years ago for like 150,000 or something like that, something really low, single. Her whole retirement is like, she's a state worker, and then she has her house, and she wants to move to Atlanta, Georgia, and so she sold the property for about 1.4 million. The gain, was a $928,000 gain. Deferred around 306 of tax. And this meant a lot of things to her. So she had some freedom from not only the location freedom, because she's moving out of Taxifornia, right? But she also had retirement freedom, so she can get some cash flow flowing rather than doing like a reverse mortgage or having to do a cash out refi, with, especially given what's today with the adjustable rate mortgages. She was able to sell, defer her tax, and then start to get cash flow from the trust to support her income and supplement her income. And the cool thing is, she's like, you know what, Brett, I have the state income and I've always lived off a low income. And that's pretty good. This just gives me a little bit extra. And that extra, she's been able to support grandkids and, more of those type of things. But more than that too, she's able to partner with the trust. And they recently purchased a house in Georgia. It's going to be a rental property. And that's really exciting for the family. So those are all the cool things that the deferred sales trust can do. And I love that story because it's now been about a year and a half since it happened. So it's all come together here.
It's nice to see some of these success stories a year or 2 or 5 years later. You're able to really see what the results of the deferred sales trust have been on the individual's personal tax returns, as well as on their investment portfolio. So appreciate you sharing that one, Brett.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I think right now we're ready to ask the public, those here on the panel, if you have any questions. Micah has been monitoring the chat. We do have a few questions that we can bring up from past sessions that we didn't have time to answer fully. But if there's anybody out there that'd like to say hello and maybe announce where you're from and highlight something that you learned today that was good, or ask a question that maybe you'd like clarification on, now is your time. And be careful, because if nobody chimes up, I might pick on people. In fact, Monica Chang, can you say hello and tell everybody where you're from and your past work experience?
Hi, Jake. Well, my name is Monica. I have recently been starting to work with Jake and to know about the products that are being offered. So this is very, very interesting. I have been an investment banker in Colombia, and I worked also in New York with JP Morgan. I have like almost 30 years career in banking, and for the last about 10 years, I have been working with private equity funds, the structuring of private equity funds and project evaluation. And more recently, I have been preparing for my CFP exam, taking my certificate with the University of Colorado. So this is a world, and this conversation is very interesting to me because it joins, puts together both worlds, investment and personal advisory. So it's super, super interesting.
Very good. Well, and Monica, I'd like you to meet Pierce. Pierce is somebody that you'll likely be working with quite a bit in the future in regards to other tax strategies, and not only the deferred sales trust, as well as Jake Carpenter, advisor extraordinaire. And then, of course, here we have Brett Swartz. Brett Swartz is our recommended and trusted trustee. He is a dynamic individual. One of the things that I tell my clients first introducing them to Brett is that of all the trustee options out there, he actually answers his phone. And only answers his phone.
That's good.
but he does it in a prompt, knowledgeable, and in help business in general, and so much about real estate. Now, I don't know, Brett, if this is a moment that you can maybe give an introduction to yourself and talk about the book.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. By the way, the Jake Miller is in the book. Thanks for all those compliments, Jake. We came out with the book last week, and it's a hit #1 bestseller for Ron, which is pretty cool. And then we have chapters in the book about, of course, the deferred sales trust, as well as how to grow your business, which is awesome. Jake's chapter is an amazing chapter. I was just reading it the other day, essentially talking about how the deferred sales trust is a game game changer. And I don't know if Pink told you guys the topic today, and maybe not, you know, even seeing the title, but it's, you know, why the deferred sales trust is created for times like this, or can do for everybody. And this is the book that we believe is created for times like this, because you want to be able to wealth, be able to invest into real estate, into securities, and the deferred sales trust is kind of the cornerstone part of the book, but it's something. So yeah, check out the book.
Good. Now we talked a little bit about Reg D, and can you touch on what is inside of a Reg D investment, or what can be, or what can be inside of the trust, and how does the trust reinvest?
Just about anything that's, as long as it's business purpose and it has investment purpose. It's not something for primary or personal use. Certainly just pay tax on whatever amount that you're going to be spending on like your primary home or like a boat or something that's personal, right? Personal consumption. So the idea of the tax deferral, whether it be a 1031 exchange, IRA, or 401k, is to invest back into the economy, which is going to grow more, flowing and moving and going back into the economy. It's going to create more jobs. When it creates more jobs, it's going to actually create more tax. Here is the IRS and is the state authorities, especially because they have new property taxes when properties sell. Of course, they have the commissions that the agents pay when they sell, taxes on those fees. We pay taxes on what we make. Of course, the owner who's receiving income from the trust. And so the best thing to understand is that this is actually benefiting everyone who's involved. It's a great thing. Now, as far as the investments themselves, the unique part about the deferred sales trust is, you know, one asset class, like a 1031 exchange would be, you have to go into like kind replacement investment property, whereas the deferred sales trust, you can go at optimal timing, meaning anytime. We typically like to dollar cost average. Of course, we like to diversify, and we like to keep a lot of liquidity. Stock market's been, let's say, been hurting for the last 12 months or so, or kind of been coming down. Well, real estate, especially commercial real estate, is starting to see some cracks and starting to turn. Okay, trust is created for times like this because you can pivot as long as you're not too tied up into a deal that's illiquid. And so part of what we private placement, a real estate lending fund, has been actually our choice. The note holder always approves of every investment, but if we had like a preference, we've been liking that because I call it 30-day liquid, which within about 30 days you can get the money out. The fund's never 10 to 12%. It's never dropped below 10%, and it pays monthly cash flow and the operations or ownership. The average net worth is $4 million. They personally guarantee the loan, and the average LTV is at 55%, meaning the value of the 45%, which would be a lot, in order for them to lose $1. And even before that, they're close or come alongside to help the person out, and therefore preserve the capital for the head. Now might be a good time to pivot and working with Jake Miller, Jake Carpenter, to buy stocks that are perhaps down. That's their, what does the client prefer? What do they feel comfortable with? But also, what are some opportunities, and create a family every kind of niche to help execute on not only this preservation of wealth, but also the ability to grow. More technical stuff for Jake Carpenter, maybe on the Reg D, if he wants to touch on that.
Go ahead, Jake Carpenter. You want to touch on what can be in a package deal so that a trust can invest in them directly?
Yeah, so Reg Ds are great because, again, invest in a lot of different kinds of flavors of real estate, whether it be a multifamily blend. There can really be a lot of things, both inside the country and outside the country, that are real estate based, just as long as it fits the risk tolerance of the individual and the seller who's working with Brett Swartz, the trustee, to make sure it's alignment with their risk tolerance. But there's a lot of upside. I mean, Reg D is kind of been directly managing and owning and running in an active way real estate. It's kind of the best of both worlds and being able to access real estate, but not necessarily being actively involved. You don't have to deal with trash, toilets, tenants, liability, and management, but the returns are still pretty good, as Brett Swartz was saying. Generally there's double digit returns and sometimes even double digit income opportunities off of those. And so we can blend those in a portfolio of real estate where there's Reg Ds in different the country, maybe a little bit of the country, and then time those so that when they come due, we can take a look at that capital that comes back from the Reg Ds and go, hey, are there some stocks that are down that maybe we want to shift over into with a portion of that to take advantage of some of the upside, as the market volatility always provides some opportunity. When the stocks are down, they're on sale. So it's a beautiful way of being able to move around within the trust, because the trust doesn't have to, as a 1031 exchange, go back into like kind property. And this is also the beauty with the business sale, using the deferred sales to use a deferral strategy that a business sale does not qualify for 1031 exchanges. So now you can take proceeds from a business sale. Maybe it's highly concentrated. You got $10-20 million wrapped up in one business. That's very good out through some Reg Ds in different locations of the country and different kinds of asset classes, maybe even a little bit out of the country, and create some different three-dimensional diversity is what I call it. And then also look at the stock market and decide, when things are down, when is a good time to move in? Maybe when is a good time to move out?
Sometimes it's in the middle too, Jake Miller and Jake Carpenter, right? We have some T-bills, right? We've been looking at T-bills quite a bit, or even money markets that, paying relatively, unless the U.S. government fails on the T-bills, low risk. But Jake Miller, you want to touch on just the ability to analyze neither in Reg D nor stocks, but just be waiting and being patient.
Right, and I call that opportunity investing. It's very similar to the identify. Pierce in the very beginning was talking about the team that's brought to the table. And even though sometimes we wear a hat of like financial advisor or corporate asset manager, there's a distinction. With the sales trust, some of these talented individuals are selected specifically because of their experiences and their ability within their industry. Not any financial advisor knows how to do point, Brett. What does that mean? That means investing in the short term so that when there's an opportunity, you're fully liquid. You're not going to feel pain by selling because of timing. So you invest in the short term until that big real estate deal comes along, or until that big joint partner comes around, or until the timing is right for next move. Let's not be lazy with the money, right? We don't want lazy money sitting in a bank account that might go under, like Silicon Valley, right? We want to be doing something that allows you to earn 4, 5, 6% interest, what have you, in the meantime, until we're ready to pull the trigger. When I say pull the trigger, Brett, as the trustee, is usually behind the goals and objectives and guidance from the individuals who are now the creditors or the lenders to the trust, right? So they establish the parameters, and some of those parameters might be hold and wait. And so a lot of times we hold and wait in treasury bills. We might layer a number of bills so that we're getting a better rate of return, but at the same time not incurring any risk and having zero.
That's perfect. That's great. Well said, Jake Miller and Jake Carpenter. Good job. Pierce Short, can I add anything to this? Looks like you're muted.
No, I'm not muted. No, I think that's the beauty of it. You can ebb and flow of opportunities. one of the worst places you can be is a motivated buyer. And if you have to and use one strategy to, a 1031 or whatever, right, to try and defer the tax, I thought wags the investment dog, as you like to say, and it pigeonholes you in this market, in this kind of landscape. Flexibility, maneuverability, and be able to control timing and what assets you can go out of can exponentially change the wealth that you create.
You nailed that. I want to add to that too, like getting out of debt right now. It's the worst thing to be a motivated debt on other assets that you haven't sold. And the reason you haven't sold them is because of the capital gains tax. And even if you sold them into the 1031, guess what? You have to replace the debt, right? And this is where we strategize and work with you to be able to retire a lot of that debt, get it out of your name, typically using Delaware statutory zero coupon, corporation's name and your name and non-recourse, but it still satisfies the requirement if you have any debt over basis challenges, or if you don't have debt over basis challenges, just simply retiring the debt, getting your powder dry so that you can take advantage of opportunities to purchase at a discount, whether that be stocks, don't get foreclosed, or having to do short sales on their assets, or whether that just be deals that actually make sense for you when you find it, because you have the time to find it. And $20 million apartment complex in Newport Beach, but you might find a perfect $5 million deal 6 months from now, and another 3 can be sitting and waiting for the next deals. In other words, you don't have to buy another $20 million deal right away. And so it's giving you that up pricing based upon the intrinsic value of the asset, regardless of the price, right? Versus just saying, oh, I'm not even looking at deals that are less than 10 or 15 or 20 million because I've got to replace this thing. Or I'm just saying I can't even look at anything on sale because my gift card is going to force me to pay $300 for these. I don't spend it in 4 hours. I might as well jeans. It's going to be, rather than being like, I found a great deal like 50, right? So I think that's key to have that freedom. Pierce York, add anything to that?
So talking about optimal timing right there, that brings up another deal story of the week. Brett, do you recall the auto dealership that we spoke with this week?
So that we spoke, I don't.
So we had the tax attorney, and this auto dealer out of the state of Maine is looking to sell the Buick portion of his used car models and brands there. And this represents roughly 1.7 of capital of income that he's going to receive, 1.7 million that's going to be taxed at capital gain. A number of different tax mitigation strategies, and is intrigued by the deferred sales trust. And he was the individual that we were comparing a opportunity zone fund investment after the fact, or proactively setting up a deferred sales trust.
A little bit's come back to me, but yeah, but anyway, this is good. This is good.
The timing piece that you brought up with this last story became very important, specifically for him. The timing of being able to reinvest the assets in something that actually can produce, because a lot of the opportunities, the savings or the benefit are in the tax savings. The actual rate of return on a lot of opportunities funds that he's been looking at through a number of advisors are very minimal, 4 or 5%. Here with the Telus Trust, he could put that into treasury bills, have a lot less risk, and have the same outcome. Well, similar outcome in the short run. However, in discussion with him on a number of the different pros and cons of both strategies, he's more towards the side of the deferred sales trust because there's a higher degree of flexibility and higher rate of return. And we can couple the deferred sales trust, as we keep mentioning, as a keystone strategy in a stone archway. There's a lot of other strategies that we can use as he does take assets out of the deferred sales trust and reinvest them. And so,
Yeah, I think that's great. Let me give you the top 10 right now. I'll try to do rapid fire, and then maybe Pierce and Jay, you can add to it as well. Reasons to have optimal timing. Number one, dollar cost averaging, right? You two assets, regardless if it's up or down market. If you have the ability to be liquid, you can dollar cost average. Number two is high, which is another form of dollar cost averaging, but essentially you can buy when it makes sense, right? When the deals make sense. Number three, optimal timing. You can whether it be real estate, stock, whether it be the sidelines like with T-bills just sitting there. But number four would be optimal timing for just your lifestyle, right? Like it's optimally timing for me to retire and not spend as much time building wealth, right? So wealth, financial freedom, right? Our clients have achieved that many millions of dollars ago. It's now wealth, my energy wealth, my hobbies, my travel, my giving back and making a difference wealth. So it's optimal timing for you. Is that 4 or 5? Maybe that's 4. Number 5 would be optimal timing with 31 right now, typically, and with debt having increased so rapidly, so fast, perhaps instead of fixing debt right now at a bad timing for 5 years, perhaps you can fix debt when things actually calm down and the Fed stops inching up. So it can be optimal timing to take on debt when deals make sense. I think that's only 5. So I'm gonna pass it to Jake. Jake, what do you think of any more?
You know, in the world of investing, it's really critical to have a couple different timelines in mind. And so not only when to get in, but when to get out. And so one of the others might be
yeah, and by the way, and cash out too when the trust goes up, right? Because the cool thing is you typically get the gains that are rolling back into the trust. Let's say you buy a stock today that goes up 30 gains back into the trust, and typically the trust is still operating at a loss on the trust level, but you haven't received that income from the trust. It's the fear of missing out or the fear of having to suffer the tax consequences to sell high. So it's optimal timing, not only on the buy, but at good timing. That's a good one, Jake. I haven't thought about that one yet. Pierce, can you think of any other optimal timings?
Yeah, I would say optimal timing to not buy. Like,
so
you're not forced to buy right now. Oh, and you can sit down and you can breathe. You don't have to. Yeah. You don't have to go, right? Or optimal timing to kind of spend more time with family, right? Like maybe you have kids and they're in their 12 to 15, and you'd rather take a break for a few years, get passive, like one of Jake's carpenter's people, right? And you want to spend time when they go to college, you can get back into investing.
That's the key, right? Optimal time to be an entrepreneur when and if you want to be again, which most entrepreneurs, they always want to be. That's how they love to do what they do. I recognize that, but if I can sell it now with the real estate, like Warren and Catherine did, right? When they were spending time with 10-year-olds, the twins, and they're going, I'm driving 4.5 hours, on weekends to go deal with the toilets, trash, and liability of the property. How about oh, by the way, we've increased their cash flow by about 50%, and we've decreased their risk, and we've got them out of tax California for that investment, and they diversified their wealth. But the point was, they could still go back immediately, or a couple of years from now, or when the kids are a certain age, they can also partner with their kids. That's the other one I've seen too. I've seen clients that help them to help their children be an entrepreneur, because guess what? You can partner with your children to start a business. Do it all yourself. You can do it within the family and keep that going. Anything else come to mind, Pierce or Jake, on that?
Sure, there's more.
Good. Well, we did about 8 there. 7 or 8. We tried for 10, but we're just going to expand our minds here. I think we caught up. Well, everybody, or Micah?
Absolutely. I guess, Mike, people want to reach out to Strategic Tax Solutions. How do they do that?
Yeah, our website, strategictaxsolutions.com, or 800 number 800-773-1848.
People have questions for you about tax or the deferred sales trust. How do they reach you?
You can find me at Living in Newport Beach, California, YouTube channel, or KingdomLuxuryRealty.com. You can also have a bunch of different emails that are all over all the websites. So on there somewhere. Yeah, the websites will bring you.
And with that web, it almost sounds like they need to walk out to the beach to see you.
Yes, if you're in Newport Beach, you got some real estate that you want to sell, or you're in Orange County, let us know.
Yeah.
We can absolutely, or San Diego.
Wonderful. Jay Carpenter, how do people say hello to you? How do they reach out?
That's two ways, is to email me at jake, Jake at carpenter.capital, capital, CAPITAL, or you can call me at 509-460-8700.
Very good. And of course, Monica Ching, if you want to reach out to her, she's available through our website and our phone number. But in addition, Monica, you're on LinkedIn, right? So
My contact, I'm very easy to contact through LinkedIn.
awesome. Very
Thank
good.
you.
All right. How do they do that?
You can go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. Also, we're streaming this live on our YouTube channel, Capital Gains Tax Solutions, so you can check that out. We're also streaming Expert CRE Secrets as well. And then don't forget about the book and the Proven Playbook for Unlocking Your Ideal Wealth Plan for yourself and your clients on the sale of any asset of any kind. Needs to be at the #1 bestseller list. And we'd love the opportunity for you to check this book out. Go to Amazon to check out how to get that book. Take us away.
All right, guys. Have a wonderful weekend. And remember us, should you be experiencing that largest transaction of your life and it might be eligible for a deferred sales trust, give us a call and we will help you know if you're an eligible candidate. Thanks now. Bye-bye.
Bye now.